Hey everyone, thanks for hopping on. We're excited for today for Small Business Live. We haven't been on for a couple of weeks, but today we have our special guest, Mayor Quinton Lucus, who's joining us right about now. So,
Good timing.
hey, good timing, Mayor.
Howdy.
How are you doing? We're
I'll go this way.
we're so happy that you can join us today, and we're excited to just discuss the what does reopening Kansas City look like, and what are some of the game plan. So, Devin, I know you have some questions for the mayor, and I'll let you kick it off.
All right. Just good afternoon, everybody. Mayor, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it. First off, I just want to thank you for everything that you've done. I think, you've really stepped up, not to get into the politics, but, you didn't have the best direction from our local, or not our local, but the governor, but you really stepped up, did what you had to do to make our city safe and to make everybody feel, like we're all headed in the right direction with all of this, with it being such an unprecedented time. So just wanted to ask you kind of, how did you come to some of these decisions about reopening? Who's been your sort of trusted advisors? And then when looking at reopening, who are you turning to figure out the best way to go forward? Or are there any other cities that you've been kind of looking to see how they're going about this?
Yeah, so first of all, it is good to be with everybody. I am excited to visit with the group. How do we come to some of these decisions? Well, I've had the fortune of working very closely and collaboratively with my health director, Dr. Rex Archer. I also have had the chance to work, I think, fairly closely with a number of mayors actually throughout the state of Missouri. The mayor of St. Louis, Lyda Krewson, is one example. And as we were going through things, we realized, well, we're kind of in similar places. We have the same governor who's not giving the world's most significant orders. And so we thought it was important for us to collaborate. But even beyond that, at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and actually at the Super Bowl, I had the chance to meet several other mayors. The mayor of San Francisco, a woman by the name of London Breed, who is, I think, an outstanding leader and was really on the forefront of, fighting COVID in a way that has made it so her very dense city has not run into some of the challenges we've seen in places like New York, Detroit, and New Orleans. And so I'm continuing to always learn from those folks, work hard with them, but that's how we do it. Then another part of it is you always have to stay structured with what you think is right? And I've always been all about, my goal is to make sure people are healthy. I know I can fix economies, I can fix a lot of other things, but I can't take lives back, right? I can't actually change a death statistic. And so that's why it was very important for us, I think, to get that work done.
Awesome. I've seen some reports that talk about Kansas City did San Francisco a favor by winning that Super Bowl. Had they had that grade, the spread could have been a lot worse for them. So thanks to our Chiefs for pulling that off. And I know that was huge for you as a mayor coming into that. So I know we've got a lot of business owners and professionals on this on the Zoom. Can you talk a little bit about, the new, 10-10-10 rule? What does that mean? I know a lot of folks may be confused about it. If you could just elaborate a little bit more about that, that'd be great.
Well, I think there has been, by the way, we knew we liked Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs before, but now they're saving the people of San Francisco too, yeah. Right? I mean, how amazing are they? I think as we talk about businesses and what reopening looks like, I actually did talk to the governor of Missouri this morning on the very topic. We have to do what we can, I think, in two different areas. One is about how we reopen. You got to reopen responsibly. We have to make sure that as we talk about reopening, we're actually thinking about how we can still stay safe and responsible. We're not going back to giant crowds. We're not going back to like handshakes immediately. We're not doing some of that stuff. But what we do need to make sure we're doing is finding a way for businesses to exist. That's why I'm proud of my work yesterday to open up streets, sidewalks, parking lots for restaurants to allow so many folks to actually expand their restaurant footprint, their bar footprint. And by the way, that applies to all types of businesses. So it's not just your restaurant or bar. It can be anything under the sun that has the chance to really, I think, use public space in a more helpful way to make sure businesses can survive, particularly while we're under pretty strict capacity rules. So that's one of your areas. I think another area that we have to work with is in connection with how can we leverage CARES Act money, federal money, for its best. This week I appeared before the Jackson County Legislature. It was a fascinating visit. But one of the things that I was asking about was up to $18 million for business relief funds in Kansas City. The CARES Act allows local governments to help out so many businesses that have been so severely harmed during this crisis. And I think it is vital that we actually do that somewhat quickly. I think it is vital that we actually go through the work to make sure that we're addressing that long term. And so that's, I think, yet another step of what it is that we're trying to do to make sure we're supporting Kansas City businesses.
Exactly. I think, Kevin and I have had a lot of conversations around the CARES Act, specifically the PPP program and the EIDL. And I know there's been a lot of reports out that show the lack of access for women and minority-owned businesses. And so I know, just wanted to share that. I know AltCap was recently approved as a PPP lender. So we're definitely trying to take addressing that gap in the access, whether it be relationships, things of that nature. So we've, reached out to all of our chambers, all the different minority chambers, to let them know if they've got members. If anybody's watching this now, if you know of any businesses that maybe didn't get access to PPP for the first round, please feel free to reach out to me. I've got my contact information below. Would love to talk to you. One other thing before I let Kevin maybe open it up for some more questions was I saw the fellowship. So one of our colleagues, LaDonna, who's amazing. I know you got to meet her and you see how amazing. We're lucky to have her on our team as well. Can you talk a little bit about what her role is and how that plays into the larger, some of the larger goals that you're looking to do from an economic development perspective?
LaDonna, first of all, is an amazing professional. If you ever look at the bio for LaDonna Gooden, who is in my office now, she is brilliant. We're lucky to have her in Kansas City. And what she is doing is really, I think, rethinking for the city how we do economic development. So much of, quote, economic development by local governments is about real estate tax breaks, right? And we're doing economic development like it's still 1975. And so for that, it is, we want to build building. We're going to give tax breaks to build building, and then that builds an economy. It ain't like that anymore. You all know this better than I do. It's not about a business necessarily needing a gigantic factory these days. It's not about somebody wanting incentives that are just based on property tax. It's about talent. It's about, frankly, how do we create an ecosystem in the city? How can we spur investment in so many of our startup businesses in Kansas City, or our non-startup businesses in Kansas City? And so it's really LaDonna's role to reshape how we see that in Kansas City government. I think she's already hit the ground running, talking to a number of different groups about really how do you get beyond the framework of how things work now, right? Kansas City government has a bunch of offices that have existed for years, right? How do we make even our BizCare office, which I know does a lot of work, how do we make it even more relatable to your everyday business? How do we make sure they're doing good outreach to everyday businesses? There's a lot of money we leave on the table in this city. Exactly. And so that's an area of interest that I would have.
Okay. And something that I was actually thinking about, one of my colleagues and I have talked about this in the past. I know we give a lot of incentives to a lot of developers, but I think this year, because of the crisis, it's the small businesses that are really driving, a lot of tax revenue to the city. What can the city do maybe in repositioning some of those resources for those small businesses that need it the most? And we had this idea of almost using like business vouchers for businesses so that they can actually, use that with their whoever their property owner is. It'll give them, a month or two of paying for rent which would then alleviate the stress of having to cover that expense. So have you guys discussed any of those sort of new approaches? Because I think we've got to be innovative during this time in order to really make sure we're helping small businesses survive this unprecedented pandemic.
I think we've tried to continue to be as creative as we can. One of the things that we've talked about is providing more available and free space to area businesses, knowing that that's one of those kind of standing costs that a lot of people have as a barrier to entry in their ability to kind of get their businesses off the ground. So that's one. Another is reduction in fees. The city can't always necessarily give things, but we certainly can take it away. And what I mean by that is not actually take away things from you, but we can take away things that are real pain in the rear for you, right? And so if you don't need to go through the same approach of a business license, if you're not having to pay some of the same fees, if we make it easier, if we make all of these things online accessible, then I think we find ourselves in a position where we can actually get things done faster and make Kansas City a much more hospitable place to do business.
Yeah. Looks like we have a question here for the mayor, Nicola Nichols. What is the outlook for large event gatherings such as Power and Light events, Sprint Center, Royals, and Chiefs games?
It continues to be a path for us. We are not there yet in terms of opening large scale events. We continue to try to make sure that as we are being smart in our reopening, we're under the 10-10-10 rules now. And so that really is about 10% capacity in a lot of venues. That means we could still actually fit about 8,000 people in Arrowhead, but we're not at that point where we're trying to actually establish it. Instead, we're trying to make sure that we actually have a long kind of smart process to reopening. I would love to be in a position where we're having big events in Kansas City by the middle of July. And indeed, that's kind of a goal on some of our convention and tourism bookings, the music hall, municipal auditorium, et cetera. But we'll have to make sure we don't have more outbreaks. We'll have to make sure we continue to stay smart about COVID-19. And I think that's some of the work that's going to be essential for us going forward.
So what does it look like? I know we're entering, isn't it, phase 2 of the reopening of the city?
Yeah, kind of. Although in Kansas City, we don't really call them phases 1.5 or phase 2. We just got 10% capacity. We're going to get to 50%. And then one day it's all open. That's us. But go ahead.
That's great. Love it. So can you, so some of the people that are hopping on from Facebook and different things, I think they're like restaurant owners, there's some gym owners that I'm spotting out, real estate agents. What does it look like for these folks, like just reopening? I think there's some clarity maybe that we can help with these small business owners in regards to what a gym may look like or what a restaurant may look like.
I think when you talk about how we can help the small business owners, I mean, that's one reason that we've tried to actually be consistent with our rules. Other jurisdictions, I think, had some very interesting plans, and usually they had good visuals and graphics with them and all of that. Ours is like, hey, 10%. When the time comes, we'll try to get to 50%. We think that sort of clarity is important. And I think really what we can do best for business is give clear guidelines of what's going on. And then the other step is to try to support them with things like opening up the street, support them with things like removing fees, supporting them with things like CARES Act funding to the extent you can make that loan. And so, or grant really. And so that's the work that I see us doing. And that's the most important thing we can do right now to help people recover.
That's really good. That's great. Yeah.
I did overhear you on the radio talking about the lack of federal support for our city. Can you talk a little bit about that, kind of what you're doing right now to try to get access to some of those federal resources? We talked about the CARES Act, but is there anything else that you're kind of working on?
So, we continue to certainly, that's one of those where I have to just have a conversation with like every person in the world, which makes it a little challenging because every county commissioner, every county legislator, like our senators, our congress people. And we're going to continue to do that. I mean, I think we can't sit on the sidelines and think anybody's going to kick us a bunch of money because that's not happening. What we need to make sure we do, however, is show that there are smart expenses that we're going to be paying out of it. And so, I think that's what I'd like to see more than anything. Us continuing to work with our city departments in terms of kind of a schedule of costs, what our expectations are, what our anticipated costs are. And that's the sort of work that we're doing now.
Awesome. I have a couple of fun questions. A couple of my buddies have texted me to ask, what's your favorite barbecue place? I know we don't want to date, but you got to give at least your top 5 in no specific order.
I'll give you the top 5 because the favorite always starts trouble, and because I'm a good Kansas City and it kind of depends on the day, right? So, like Gates is certainly a choice. I like Bryant's. It's down the street from my house. I'll go across the state line. I like what I still will always call Oklahoma Joe's. I guess that gets me to 3. I actually really do like Q39. And then probably to round out that group, I'd probably put in some Jack Stack.
Okay.
Ooh, that's a good.
But everybody else, I love everybody. So,
yeah. There's too many good options anyways. And
right.
then another question was, who's your barber? I see you got a nice cut there. Who's
my barber is God, right? Okay. Like just I'm just blessed with now. I do it myself, man. Although smart, because getting a good shave and a lineup, people pay good money for that. But that's why the pandemic didn't get me too much. I tend to do it all myself.
Well, if you ever need to borrow some, I got you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I have one more question for you. So, how often are you actually? So, I'm a digital marketer. So, I do this day in and day out. So, what are your thoughts in regards to social media, and what's recommendations for the people out there? What are media things that they should trust and what they shouldn't listen to, and in general, how they can differentiate what's credible and what's not?
I'm a big guy on trends. My view is that you should always, for example, I get a lot of flack on social media, right? People come at me because it's the part of the position. And people ask me sometimes, do you get mad about this or that negative comment? I don't. Unless, right, there are like 1,000 people that all of a sudden are kind of addressing something. Then that tells me, oh my gosh, we have a problem, right? We need to actually make sure we're addressing things. And so I would encourage anybody who thinks about this sort of work all the time to always look to not so much what just happened that day, but what direction are we heading, right? I think that's important in science, it's important in social media, it's important in marketing, that are people understanding what your brand is, or is there some fundamental brand threat? And that's been probably the most important and impactful thing that I do. Another thing is I do make sure I engage and try to be engaging. And what do I mean by that? It means that people actually want to see you being entertaining, right? And not a goofball necessarily. It's not me like posting pictures of me at concerts or something, but instead, which I've done, instead it's actually like letting people know that, they can interact with you, you're a good source of information, and they should keep coming back. That's what I want. Repeat players. I want people that are feel like they're getting to know me. If they are following me, they get to know my brand. And I would say that to any digital marketers, making sure people have that familiarity with the brand so that they're thinking about, Woolworths or something every time there's a particular type of good that they need. Now, the problem with firms sometimes is that they lose that. And so they lose that identification. Why do you, I saw JCPenney file for bankruptcy or was considering it, right? Why do you need JCPenney now in a world where there's so much, right? Whereas actually, if you think about it on an opposite side, there are people that are like, I know Trader Joe's because even though it's really just a grocery store, right? For some, it's a wholly different experience. And I'm always one who says we want to create that wholly different experience.
That's so good because it's so true. I think people forget, it's about that authentic experience. And I think large brands oftentimes lose that, and even people in politics, I think people want that authentic person to connect with that's actually engaging and we're all able as citizens to relate to. And And that's why we appreciate you so much for just being able to hop on a live stream with AltCap, Devin and I, and just connecting with the local community, the people that are on Facebook and LinkedIn. It sheds some new light as how much you got on your hands. And there's a lot going on. And when we talk about reopening the city, it's not as simple as, oh, you just open that back up and hey, we don't have to worry about social distancing anymore because the virus isn't out there, right? The virus is still out there. Okay, that's just the reality. It's just how do we work with it, right? And I think oftentimes we forget that. We think, hey, let's just open up the city, but then we don't. The citizens ourselves, we don't see behind the scenes. What all is going on. All the work that the government and the city and all the people involved, the healthcare, the specialists that are working hard, behind the scenes so that we're all happy. And at the end of the day, we just can't please everyone, right?
No, that's right. And I mean, and it's why I always respect the opportunity like this one to get a chance to talk to people, regular folks, about what we're doing, where we're going, and to always hear some good questions and thoughts as well.
Exactly. Yeah. One last thought. I feel like you're what, 6 months? How long has it been since you've been in office?
Yeah, not long enough, like 9 months.
9 months. So yeah, I guess what are some of your biggest takeaways so far? What's been kind of one of your biggest learning experience, as a mayor, in order to get things accomplished? What does that look like?
Ready or not, here I come, right? I mean, it's that's more than anything. COVID came at us fast. A Chiefs parade came at us fast. I mean, it is, I'm not just full of cliches all day, but you really have to be ready for these sorts of things. I remember I convened a meeting of all the department directors who, it's funny, the police chief, the health director, who's been at it for 22 years, all of that. I'm 35 years old. But people look to you and they say, all right, Mayor, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
You have to learn that. You have to be ready for leadership. And, I'm proud that I think I've been up to the challenge. Not that it isn't a new and interesting challenge every day.
Yeah. Ruben had mentioned this morning, he quoted Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And I feel well, we've all with COVID. So
I just have 2 more questions from the audience. One is Abraham here. He said, I do have questions. What is the city doing to protect the employees that want to stay and work from home? I have had a few friends with kids share the same concerns.
Yeah, so the thing that we did in our order, now, of course, it only applies to Kansas City, was kind of a clause that requires that a business that is reopening allow employees who are teleworking to continue doing so. If they have either needs to take care of a child or actually an adult who has some needs, or alternatively, if they have healthcare concerns. And so we've enshrined that in city ordinance. The punishment relating to that is in the event that a business doesn't permit that, then we can follow up from our health department. And ultimately the threat is their business license.
And then one more question here, and it's actually my wife. She said, what about swimming pools? What does that look like?
So public versus private. Public pools, we haven't made a decision yet. Our hope is that they do open this summer. Private pools, everything is subject to that very simple 10-10-10 rule. So you have to keep capacity limits, but otherwise everything is open in Kansas City.
Okay, that's great.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your time, and we're just happy that you came on here, and thank you.
Happy to do it. You all take care. We'll see you around.
You too. Have a good one. Bye. Good stuff, guys. Thank you.